So we don't have to beg anymore, because we flipped. We threw out the Republicans who wouldn't pass the Child Victims Act, and we put in the senators, the Democratic senators, who will pass the Child Victims Act. The Assembly will pass the Child Victims Act, and the governor will sign the bill. And we're going to have a Child Victims Act this year, 100%.
Yeah.
5 Republicans flipped. And do you know every one of those Republicans came back here? I went up to Richard Funke's district. That day he flipped. There's other Republicans flipped. If they flipped, they survived. If they didn't, they went home where they belong. But I had to battle back from Al to be here today. And a lot of victims, wherever I went in this state, I tried to be a voice for the voiceless. I tried to be a voice for those who didn't make it. Every day we read about opiate deaths, suicides, the rate that a person lives in rural areas is dropping rapidly, inner city. Those were the victims I thought about. Because 90% of victims in this state have not been abused, as we hear much about a priest or a rabbi or an institution. They've been abused by a family member or a stranger like myself or a friend, a family friend. And I would never forget them. And that's why we need no statute of limitations. There should be no statute of limitations on such a heinous crime as child sexual abuse. We have to provide for those 90%. So what I would urge the legislature to put in a fund to help every victim in this state. That was my objective, to help every victim, the voiceless, the ones who came forward, the ones who spoke out. Every victim deserves justice. We have to educate our children that it's okay, and we have to educate teachers and parents and people in authority and even the police that when somebody reports that they've been sexually abused, that action has to be taken or they will face consequences. They have to mandatory report it. I'm not talking about private schools. I'm talking about teachers in every school, priests, rabbis, people have to realize what's going on. This is an epidemic in our society, as we've seen across this country, with the Pennsylvania grand jury report, with Nassar, in this state. I could bring up hundreds of cases. Look in your papers every day. That's all you have to do. Every day on the news, someone is either child pornography, they've abused a kid, and we're going to do something. And that's why I work so hard, day and night, basically for the last 50 years. And I've had a great family. You see my nephew back there. Thanks for coming. Some of my friends deserted me. It's all right. And advocates who supported me, I thank you. I really do. This was not easy to go around the state and hold 16 rallies and tell people about the worst moments of your life. Not easy. But it had to be done.
I believe 13 years it's taken, but we understand why. And I'm going to say why. And some of the people say, be careful what you say. I earn the right to say what I'm about to say. Thank you, Gary, for what you've done. Okay. Now, as you know, I was the first one interviewed by the Attorney General's office. And when I called them, they called me back, and the first thing they said, we want names, because we are sick and tired of covering up or not mentioning people who are responsible for why we don't have this law. And the two criminals why we don't have this law, and if anybody doesn't agree with me, put your hand up, Cardinal Dolan and Governor Cuomo. This is how it started. After gay marriage passage, which Governor Cuomo needed so bad. So Cardinal Dolan didn't give him a hard time. In return, what he got was silence on the Child Victims Act, and the proof is in the pudding. And Governor Cuomo last year, at the last minute, put Marcy Hamilton's eyes and Catherine Robert, who was in the office, just at the last minute, to give Cardinal Dolan extra time to pay off as many more victims so they can't have the right to sue. Okay, now so I'm just going to mention quickly, so to refresh your memory, why this bill hasn't passed for 13 years. Don't forget John Flanagan, who wouldn't allow a vote. Now remember, he took the place of Dean Skelos, who wouldn't allow the Child Victim Act for a vote either. He's in prison now with his son. Now let's remember Sheldon Silver, because you guys have to understand what's happened in the past, why we're still here. Sheldon Silver cheated on his wife with the lobbyists from the New York Catholic Conference who did not want this bill to pass. Think about that. Then we also had, I'm going back a little ways, but Shirley Huntley, I don't know if you remember her. She was for the Child Victim Act. Then when it came time to vote, she voted no. She also got jailed.
This year, we have to make sure that the culmination of Gary's and all the advocates' efforts was not for naught. And we have a strong Child Victims Act so that everyone who he's been fighting for finally gets some justice. And then the second component is making sure that the perpetrators are held accountable. And Gary and advocates and legislators who have supported this, last year, it seemed like for a little while that we were maybe only even going to get a half a loaf with this cockamamie scheme that the Senate Republicans put forward, where yes, perhaps the victims can get some assistance, some financial assistance for what they went through, the hell they went through. But that scheme even would have shielded, protected the very individuals who committed these heinous crimes, the very institutions who allowed these crimes to move forward, knowingly allowed these crimes to move forward. Here we are today in a new Senate, in a new day, where we are speaking as one voice loudly and clearly. We're going to get the assistance for the victims, and we're going to hold the perpetrators accountable. Period. End of story. And we ought to do it without waiting for the budget, by the way. We ought to do it before the budget.
And so Mark Pell has been coming here for 13 years, fighting. He's supported me. He's in prior years paid for buses to come up here with victims. Just done a heck of a lot of work. He spoke at Anna Kaplan's rally. He's been at the rallies, and appreciate you coming today, Mark. Why don't you say a few words?
Thank you, Gary. I hope this is my last year. I think this is my 14th year I've been here. But I don't think the impact that led to today's and the historic opportunity that we will get the bill passed is due to the tenacious work and the lobbying on a daily basis from heart to heart from people like you, Gary, people like Connie, people like Jack, who comes from Florida today, people like the Erickson family that you came forward, even though you lost your loved one. So it's the heart to heart that changed the minds of so many individuals. Even, I understand, even some Republicans will be voting for the Child Victims Act.
Yes.
The only opponents that we have at this moment is some, they call themselves religious groups. I don't know how religious they really are if they oppose the Child Victims Act. And we prepared this flyer. The Child Victims Act is not an attack on religious institutions. You may be reading in the paper that some of them say, hey, you're going to bankrupt institutions. Well, we're going to bankrupt institutions, but we're not going to bankrupt protecting our children, which is the priority. So God bless all the senators, the elected officials. Gary, for hundreds of years, from today on, people are going to remember January 14, 2019 as the day that New York became, from the weakest laws in the state protecting children to the strongest in the state of New York.
Yeah.
I'm Assemblymember Patel Frontes. I'm here today for the legislative building
express my support for the Child Victims Act. As you know, there should be no statute of limitation for people who were abused, whether they were children or teenagers. And what this act does is secure justice for people who were sexually abused or exploited, regardless of when that took place. And I have to say I'm very proud and honored to lend my name and be a co-sponsor of this act. And I am on the right side of history and hope that everyone will join me as well. Thank you.